Closing arguments. We're here. Finally, we're here. The fact finder has seen all of the evidence. They've heard all of the evidence, and the fact finder, either the judge or the jury, you're no longer constrained by this prohibition against argument. Now's the time, right? All of the challenges about admissibility, all of the challenges about relevance, all of the other challenges are out of the way. All of the witnesses have given their part of the puzzle, and you get to now see the limitless world of possibility. What's the purpose of closing argument? The purpose of closing argument is to put together all of the pieces of the puzzle and then explain what the picture is, right? You get to bring in all of those profound statements by the witnesses, all of those moments of action-packed impeachment, where you get that crucial piece of evidence in, especially if you publish that evidence to the jury, especially if in publishing that evidence to the jury, they've been able to feel something, touch something, hold something, look at something, right? Watch you walk through it. You had a witness stand down to point to it or explain as they looked into the eyes of the jury what was going on, right? Then your heart beat just a little bit faster, just a little bit faster. The closing argument is where you must make it clear, right? You can't think, well, I see it, or it makes sense to me, or it sounds logical to me. This is when you have to go outside of yourself and you have to sit in the seat of the fact finder, right? There's the saying that where you sit determines what you see, and what you see determines what you do. If I'm at a concert and I'm in the front row, what I see is freaking amazing. And as a result of what I see, what I do might be jump up and down and yell and scream and get into the feeling and get into the motion and get into the spirit and just have the best freaking time of my life. However, if I am sitting and the blood nose area, right? But where I need binoculars to see binoculars in order to see, right? If that's where I'm sitting, then what I see is not as magical. What I see is not as amazing. What I see is not as transformative. And so in order for this, the closing to be effective, you must sit in the seat of the fact finder. You have to see it from where they see it. And this is when you bring all of the information together. And this is where you show what all of that means, but you're looking at it from the perspective of the people or the person that you are trying to persuade beyond convince and compel them to give you what you're asking for. Now, in order for a closing argument to work, it's got to be logical, because if it doesn't make sense, people are going to stop listening. If it doesn't make sense, they're going to stop listening, right? It has to be believable, because if it's not believable, they will probably listen even more, because now they don't like you. They don't think that you're credible. And they're looking for specific reasons to say, see, I told you, this is why I don't like lawyers, right? And it's got to be legally sufficient, right? It can't just be persuasive. It just can't be powerful. It can't just be logical. It can't just be right, honest. Yeah? It's got to be legally sufficient. These are legal arguments that we're making, even though Aristotle says that there's 3 foundational pillars of persuasion, right? The art of persuasion is the ethos, the pathos, the logos, right? The ethos is your credibility. Don't get caught in a lie, or don't get caught in something that could be inferred as a lie, right? The logos, well, I've got to have some logic about it. It's got to make some sense. The pathos, it's got to compel me. It's got to move me. It's got to change my spirit. Yeah. But it's a legal case. So it has to be legally sufficient, because if the facts don't support your theory, you know what? You're supposed to lose. If your facts don't support your theory, you're supposed to lose. Let's talk about this component of logical. It's often helpful to reason backward, which is why it's oftentimes taught to participants of the law, to advocates of the law, to start with your closing argument. What is it that in the end you want to be able to say? You want to be able to stand up and say what? And once you've determined what it is that you want to be able to say, you can think backwards. Who can I use to get the information that I need to be able to say that? What is the information that I need to be able to say that? Right? What pieces do I need of this puzzle that will allow me to tie them together in the end and make a reasonable inference of this, right? Which necessarily leads me to the conclusion of that, right? Whatever that is. So it's often helpful to start backward, because if you start backward of where you want to end, it will take you logically to where you have to start, right? Just think about it. If I want to end here, let me back, right? In order to end here, I need this. Well, this has to have this before it, which has to have this before it, which has to have this before it. And I know that you can't see my hands, but my left hand, my right hand is the this, and it's fixed. And then my left hand moves back to the left one step each way, right? This, but I have to have this before that, but I have to have this before that. I need to make sure that this person says that. I need to make sure that this evidence gets in, right? Because it's all leading to the ultimate end of me being able to say this. Well, if I do it backwards, it will guide me all the way to the beginning. It will guide me and clue for me in who needs to be heard from. It will guide me and clue me into what do they need to see? What exhibit is helpful for me? Start in the beginning, work back. Has to be believable. Well, let's talk about this whole believability thing. For a closing argument to be sound, it must be based on facts that are likely accepted by the fact finder as true. The most logical argument would not win if the juries don't believe it. If the juries don't believe it, right? If it's not believable, people are like, and again, they're not going to shut you off if they don't believe it, but they will hold your ethos to be untrustworthy. They will hold it against you, right? And that's worse than them not listening to you. So it must be believable. How do we get that believability factor? What are the components of that believability, right? I believe what I'm saying. The lawyer believes what they're saying, but what is it that the fact finder is looking for in order for it to be termed or be deemed, quote unquote, believable? Often, the most believable information is that which is produced by the other side. Right? When you have the ability to stand up and say, you heard their witness admit, you heard their witness concede, even from their own witness's mouth, they had to agree, right? So that holds a lot of credit when it comes to believability. right? Another another tool that you can use to bolster the believability of your closing argument are the undisputed facts, right? Because those things that we both agree happened. Yes, we agree that it was a Tuesday. Yes, we agree that it was sunny. Yes, we agree that there was very little traffic on the road, very little traffic being 2 to 3 cars. Both sides agree to that. So we know that the environment that you heard about is safe because both sides agree to it. To be able to stand up and say, we both agree, we both agree, right? That's a ching on the credibility stand. I mean, on the credibility scale, that's a ching. Another reason why you should be believed, that's a ching, right? That is one step forward for you. What's another way we can bolster the believability of our closing argument? Does it make common sense? Does it fit within the common sense experience of people? Right? What's another way? See, all of these believabilities. Maybe you can't use all of these, but likely you can use most of these. And you need to bolster the believability as much as you can. Let's talk about the credibilities of the witness. Closing argument, you can talk about the credibilities of the witness. And this is where that impeachment comes in. This is where that impeachment evidence comes into play, right? Because if I can impeach you on cross-examination, do remember when we do the 3-step impeachment, the commit, the credit, confront, and once you confront them, you do not say, are you lying now or were you lying then? Right? That's argument. You don't say that, but you build up the drama to that crescendo of closing argument. I get to say, do you remember when this happened? What did that tell you about the character of that person? Tells you that they like it both ways, or it tells you that they flip flop, or it tells you that they can't be trusted. So if they couldn't be trusted on this issue, why should you listen to anything that they say, right? That's why those impeachments are so important. We've talked about the believability, talked about it being logical. Now let's talk about the legally sufficient. A final argument must address the law as well as the facts. I'll do it again. A final argument must address the law as well as the facts. A final argument may be defined as the application of proven facts to legal issues. A final argument is the A of the IRAC, of the KERPAC, of the CRAC, the TRAC. No, there is no T. Well, there might be a TRAC, but I just kind of threw that in, right? But it's the A. It's the A. It's the A. It's while in organizing legal writing, that A is analysis or application. It's the same skill for the argument. You are taking the rule of law and you are applying the facts of the case to support each required component of the rule of law. And you're not just reciting fact after fact after fact, it's dry. It's dry. Nobody wants to just listen to you run off a laundry list of things, but you're weaving it into this narrative, right? We talked about the value of the story. You're weaving it into this tale where the orange now plus the yellow now turns to brown, where the red and the blue turns to purple, right? And you're creating this beautiful mosaic of energy that leads the fact finder on this path of, well, doggone it, it must be whatever it is she's asking for. Yeah. Tools for closing argument. What are some of the tools that you can use? I've given you some video clips and some really good closing arguments, given you some video. I mean, right, there's good, there's bad, there's indifferent. The beautiful thing about the practice of law, the thing that's the most exciting about the practice of law, is there's some parts of what we do that is science, right? There's some parts of what we do that there have to be certain components in order for it to work. But so much of what we do is creative art, right? So much of what we do is creative art. So I'm going to give you some tools. Don't use all of these tools. Use the ones that are helpful. I might leave some off. If you find some other tools, then use those tools. But it's got to be clean, and it's got to be effective, and it's got to be powerful. Yeah. It's got to be convincing. It's got to be persuasive. It's got to be compelling. Yeah. So what are one of the tools that you can use as a closing argument? You can use a list as a tool for closing argument, right? I can create in real time an illustrative. I can have a big, what do you call those, post-it note boards, where I'm literally writing on it. I'm literally creating the list, right? Maybe I'm writing the list of the elements so that as I go through each one, I can check the box and say, did it, right? So lists are really huge. Exhibits. Why the heck did you go through the litany of getting an exhibit in if you're not going to refer to it in closing argument, right? If it was important enough to get it in, it's important enough to be able to use it. Now, hold on. I'm not saying that in a trial that has 500 exhibits that you're expected to use 500 exhibits in your closing argument. Let's be reasonable, right? But what I am saying is if there is one or two, right? If there are the exhibits that when you first introduced them and you published it to the jury and they went, oh, right? They got that collective gasp, or whichever ones that were reacted to the most, which is always why it's helpful to have a second chair. Always helpful to have a second chair, especially if you are trying your case before a jury, so that somebody is responsible for watching and noting their reactions when, so that that helps you sharpen and strengthen your strategy. Technology, right? If you know how to use it, use it. You can play the audio, you can play the video, you can compare and contrast inconsistent statements because you can have a PowerPoint. You know, we have all these wonderful trial tools now. We've got TrialPad and we've got all the competitors of TrialPad. There's lots of ways to blow it up and make it big and make it bright and make it fancy. But remember, it's not a movie production. Sometimes all of those bells and whistles are distracting. And sometimes that stuff doesn't work. And what I mean by that stuff, I mean, sometimes the technology doesn't work. I mean, I've seen countless times where somebody's going to come in with their computer or their tablet and it blinks. Why does it blink? We don't know why it blinks. It just blinks, right? When technology works, it's great. When it doesn't work, who knows why it's not working? Battery drained, but I thought I had it charged and I thought I had a backup, or I need a flash drive and I thought I had it, but I grabbed the right one, or the courthouse doesn't have Wi-Fi because lots of the, I'm from Texas, and Texas, especially East Texas, has some of the most beautiful, historically, architecturally mesmerizing courthouses. But, you know, most of them are not equipped with Wi-Fi. And if they do have Wi-Fi, it doesn't work half the time, right? God forbid that this is the day that the Wi-Fi managers in the skies go on strike or something, right? Woo! if you're going to use it, number one, you got to know how to use it. You got to know how to use it effectively. You got to know how to use it efficiently. And you got to make sure that it works. Because if it doesn't work, it's as good as not having it. And actually, if it doesn't work and it's not working in that moment in your presentation, it's becoming a distraction. So it's worse than not having it, because now that's become the focal point, right? Tools of closing argument in continued interactive timelines. Timelines are always really, really good, especially if you can put a chronological story together relatively easy. Your narrative is one that fits a chronological template, then a timeline is really good because it puts people in the mental and emotional frame of mind that they are part of this story as it's replaying, because it picks up and you move throughout the timeline together. So there's a lot of psychological benefits to using an interactive timeline. Interactive being one that can be interactive technology wise, or interactive in that you are creating it or building it or filling it in as you are presenting your closing argument. So again, it becomes a work that we contribute to together. As a member of the jury, that gives me more interest, investment. And because I'm vested in it, I'm probably more interested to lean in that direction because I played a part of it, right? It's all of these psychological tools. What is an argument? An argument is where you explain. Yeah. An argument is where you actually explain. In closing argument, you may, you should, and you must argue the serious, right? Take the gloves off, limitations removed, but you must be precise. What are some of the elements of a closing argument? You can conclude, you can make reasonable inferences, you want to provide as much detail as necessary to fill in the color. You can use analogies, you can use allusions, you can use stories. There's lots of different elements of a closing argument. Format of the closing argument, you've got the plaintiff's case in chief, they go first, the defendant's case, then so the plaintiff is going to close, then the defendant will close, and if you're in a rebuttal jurisdiction, then the plaintiff will get the last word with usually a 2 to 3 minute rebuttal. The petitioner, plaintiff, prosecutor, whoever it is bringing the suit, must use their argument in chief to define the issues. You lay out the theory, right? Because the nature of the litigation system is that the plaintiffs or whoever's bringing the suit, it's got to be comprehensive. So what do you want your closing argument to look like? I want it to be comprehensive. I want it to cover all the bases. I want it to be able to follow the story arc that I laid out in opening statement, and I'm covering all of the bases. What does the defendant or the respondent's closing argument look like? Usually it's a reply directly to the plaintiff's argument, right? But it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. It could be your own story. It could be your own narrative, right? A closing argument for the second person, the second party, the defendant, the respondent, whatever they are termed in your jurisdiction or in your case. If you start your closing argument with a refuting the petitioner, it sounds more powerful because you're able to really address what the plaintiff petitioner said. But you have to have a strategy. It can't be willy-nilly, right? You have to anticipate, if you are the defendant or the respondent, in your closing, you must anticipate the rebuttal. If you're in a rebuttal jurisdiction and you know that the plaintiff petitioner gets the last word, you've got to anticipate that and be able to try to either steal that thunder or minimize the effect of potentially what the plaintiff petitioner might say. Okay. If you are the plaintiff in your rebuttal, you are going to address the necessary. A rebuttal is not a recitation of the first 10, 15 minutes of your original closing, right? Right? It's powerful, the rebuttal. Everybody likes to have the last word, but you got to make the last word count, right? You got to make the last word count. As your closing. Well, I argue that the closing should be similar to the opening and the story itself. So if the opening is told in a chronological order and the actual case is tried in chronological order, then the closing probably should be chronological order, unless strategically it's more powerful to do it topically or do it by order of witnesses. Again, that's art. But the reason that I'm sharing these possibilities with you is because I want to show with you what I meant when I said in the very second slide, which is all limits are gone. The possibility is endless about how you wrap up this story. So whichever way you choose to do it the way that's going to provide maximum input that compels the trier of fact to move. Important tips: closing argument, start strong, end strong. You start your closing argument often with a grabber. What is a grabber? A grabber is something that grabs the attention, literally, right? I laugh, but it is exactly what it says it is. Something that grabs the attention of the fact finder. Remember, the opening statement by the prosecution in the Trayvon Martin case. Remember? Young man, well dressed, well groomed, right? Nice demeanor, nice stance. He doesn't have his hand in his pocket. He's not jiggling his keys. He's not fidgeting his tie, right? And he's standing there. And for a second, it's silence because he wants the eyes on him. And remember, this is the opening statement, but these are the first words out of his mouth. Fucking punks, right? Woo. So am I saying that you need to swear at people? That's not what I'm saying. Again, let's not take this out of bounds. What I'm saying is that the first thing out of your mouth in your closing arguments, after you have commanded their attention, right? After you have made sure that their eyes are on you, that first thing that you say has to blow them off of their chair, right? You want their attention and you want to grab it. The first thing that you say should not be, "Thank you very much for your time and your service. We couldn't have done," well, I mean, and I'm not saying don't be polite. I'm not saying don't be professional. I'm saying that should not be the first thing out of your mouth. Oh, right. You've got to find the most powerful way to pull them in. Pull them in, right? It's like you want to take them by the lapels and say, "Come to me," right? Pull them in. Is always start with your case, not the other side's case. If you start with the other side's case, to many people who think like me, that's an indication that your case is weak and you think they're, because you start that way, right? So don't start with the other side's case. Don't start with the other side's case. Do not begin with concessions. Again, the first thing out of your mouth is what people are going to hold on to. And you don't want to stand up there and say, well, I told you my guy wasn't perfect, right? Don't start with concessions. Don't start with concessions. Stand up straight, stand up tall, make sure your jacket is buttoned. This is a formal theater. Treat it with respect. Look at the jurors in their eyes, even if you think you're going to pass out. I'm sorry. Even if you think you're going to pass out. I don't mean stare at people because that freaks people out. But talk to them, not at them. Look at them. Talk to them. Explain to them. Give the story to them. Perform it for their benefit. It's for their it's for them, right? It's for them that you serve on behalf of your client. Me. And so if that's what I'm saying to you, what happens with your notes? Right? Number one, you shouldn't have notes that are written as a narrative, not by this point. You might start with a narrative, but by the time you edit, you'll get down to an outline, and then you'll edit and you'll edit, and then you get to bullet points, right? So you can have some references, but nothing should stand between you and that jury. Oftentimes you will see attorneys who will actually move the podium because they don't want anything between them and the jury. Don't be the lawyer who's standing up there with stuff in your hands, right? If you have a tablet or a iPad or whatever it is, or handwritten notes or a binder, or right, find a place to put it, right? Settle it in a place specific. And if you need to refer to it, then just refer to it, but let your hands be free. We've talked about how to use your hands to enhance your story, right? We've talked about the use of your hands having to be natural, though. If you naturally use your hands, then you're going to teach your hands a vocabulary, and you're going to teach your hands how to be in sync. You're going to choreograph them so that they are in sync with what you're saying, so that they help your story, right? You don't want them to distract from your story. If you are not a hands person, and let's say you're very comfortable standing without having to use your hands, then don't feel like I'm telling you got to use your hands, right? Whatever you do, it has to be you. Whatever you do, it has to be you. Can't be anybody else. Everybody else is taken. It has to be you, right? Use your face to make expression. Use your hands. You can lift things off the shelf. You can have a one-hand lift. You can have a two-hand lift. You can move things on the shelf. You can take things off of the shelf. You can put things on the shelf, but you want to make sure that it's part of the story, right? This is intentional. This is deliberate. These are not just wiggly, wavely hands, right? You're standing tall. And the reason that you're standing tall is because that is the best way to get breath from your lungs up through your throat and out, right? If you're all slumped, that air has to travel more, it has to travel through a more difficult path, so that this voice that is coming from here will oftentimes sound like this, because it's having to go through these bends and these turns. Stand up straight. Pretend that there's a string at the top of your crown that's pulling you straight up to the top. Stand straight, let people see you, right? One of the reasons I wore 5-inch heels, I wanted to be tall. I wanted to be seen. I wanted for everybody to be able to see, right? The telling of this story. Make sure your jacket is on, make sure your jacket is buttoned. For anybody who's in your jury over the ages of 45, they will see you and they will appreciate you. Okay. This isn't a fashion show. This is not the time for you to put your style on things. You are here to be an advocate. Nothing should outshine the story of your client. I know. Leave the $10,000 watch at home. Okay. Don't want to blind anybody with all the bling. What else can I tell you? You're going to find a steady stance so that you're not rocking back and forth. You're going to move with purpose, which means that you're not just walking back and forth. If there is something that you have to say and you're trying to delineate between, for instance, if you're talking about your case, your position, your theory, maybe you're standing a little bit to the left of center. And then when you want to talk about why you shouldn't believe the other side's witness or the other side's witness who made a concession, you might then want to stop speaking, take a few steps in the opposite direction, and then stand right of center. Right? You can choreograph these spots wherever you want these spots. But what you're doing is you're training the fact finder. You are bolstering your credibility. You are training the fact finder that when she's to the left of center, oh, she's talking about all of her stuff. Did you see that? Did you notice that? And then she would stop talking. And then we would watch her. She would actually watch us, watch her walk to the couple of steps over. And then she was on the other side, right? That bolsters your credibility because you're saying, hey, if I'm over here, this is what I'm talking about. Hey, if I'm right here, this is what I'm talking about. That's how you strategically move, right? You don't just move because you got nervous energy and you got to get it out. All of you, from your face to your hands to your feet to how you stand to how you move, is a part of the story. And it all has to be in sync. And it all has to be persuasive. End with your prayer. End with your ask. The last things out of your mouth are your prayer. Is it okay then to say thank you? Thank you. And sit down. Right? Thank you. And sit down. Yield the floor. Yeah. Well, do I need to do a reintroduction in my closing argument? Well, it depends, right? If there's multiple people on the team, and if the closing is being done from someone other than the opening, because in the opening, that person introduced themselves. And if this is the first time the closing attorney, if this is the first time that the closing attorney has addressed the jury, that's probably a good idea to introduce yourself. But I've already said that's not the first thing out of your mouth, right? The first thing out of your mouth is that grabber. Yeah. Themes. Can you articulate a theme? Do you articulate a theme? Is it okay if you don't articulate a theme? Let's talk about themes. Themes are those bright, pretty little packages, right? The prosecuting attorney for, believe it was the Arbery, Arbery. The prosecuting attorney for the Arbery trial used a theme of assumptions and driveway decisions. First thing out of her mouth, assumptions and driveway decisions. A notable person once said, never assume the intentions of another. Never assume the of another. Good afternoon. My name is Stephanie Ledesma Washington. Right now, of course, her name wasn't Stephanie Ledesma Washington, but that's a good way, right? So if you've got a thing that's powerful enough to articulate, you might want to articulate it, and that's a good place. That's a good grabber. There's pauses in there. I'm not just reading, or running, or memorizing, and just throwing this, regurgitating this stuff out that I've remembered, right? It's strategic. It's intentional. It's a pause to give the fact finder an opportunity to hear what I've said, to digest it before we take the next bite, right? I use my volume because if I think that there's something really important going on, if it's something that I really want you to pay attention to. So not only was my volume adjusted, my cadence was adjusted, right? My intonation may change depending on what it is that I'm trying to emphasize. All of those are your tools. And there's so many more, but these are the ones that you're going to see the most often. If you are preparing for a closing argument or a real trial, for a trial ad simulation, for a oral advocate procedure, right? Anything that you might be trying to record yourself. Record yourself. Phones nowadays are better than some of the most exotic, have some of the best cameras than some of the most exotic cameras ever built, right? In the age of selfies, everybody's living out loud. We got a front camera now, we got a back camera now, we can light the front camera now, right? There's so many things that we can do with our phones. Video your doggone self. Oh no, well, look, oh, I don't like the way it sounds. Well, the way you look and the way that you sound is the way that you look and the way that you sound. And it is how you're going to look to other people. And it is how you're going to sound to other people. So doggone it, you need to know how you look and how you sound. There's oftentimes in our mind, we've completed something. In our mind, we've said something. In our mind, we've made something very clear. But then when we watch the video of us doing the thing that we are certain that we said, or doing the thing that we are certain that we did, or connecting the dots that we are certain that we connected, we watch the video, and oftentimes we didn't do any of those things. Right? So you have to learn not only you, but you have to learn how other people see you so that you know if you need to exaggerate something or if you need to minimize something. You will see if you have a natural speech pattern that allows you to speak as quickly as you think. And because it's in rhythm with how you're thinking, it doesn't sound fast to you, but when you watch it, you might say, oh my gosh, do I always talk that fast? As you practice your closing, videotape it. If you want to send me a link to the video, I'm happy to provide you with some feedback. I'm happy to walk through it with you. We can go frame by frame by frame by frame by frame. If you want to learn how to get better, it's going to take some courage to embrace the truth, even if you don't like it. Closing arguments. So many more things that could be said, but they're not going to be said today on this video. If you have any questions, if you want to practice, if you want some feedback, if you want some training tips, send me the video. I'm happy to look at it. Other than that, if this is for my trial advocacy class, you've already gotten some directions on what it is that you need to be doing. If this is for the trial advocacy board, next week, not tomorrow, March 18th, but next week, we have some of you who are actually going to be doing some closing arguments. This is a good opportunity for you to find out what closing arguments are all about and what they look like. I've already sent the video links. If you are on a mock trial team that I am helping to train, it's some good information, right? Anything else that I can do for you, please let me know. It has been my honor and my pleasure and my blessing to be able to serve. And I look forward to seeing you on the other side.